Sometimes I can't sleep, and because my Hebrew textbook from graduate school is here, I don't really have anything to read that's that boring. And so I turn on infomercials. And at 2:30 in the morning, they seem pretty appealing, really. From 2 to 2:30, I can lose 40 pounds. From 2:30 to 3, I can get washboard abs. And from 3 to 3:30, I can finish it off with all kinds of energy beyond my wildest imagining. In an hour and a half, I can do all that. That's what I used to think. Now that I have new eyes from the Williams Eye Institute, I can see the small print at the bottom of the infomercials. And they always say a whole bunch of stuff, but in there are always these 3 words: results not typical. Which means they have found the only 5 people in the universe who on this program have lost 40 pounds, got washboard abs, and have all the energy that they could possibly imagine. That's a pretty small sampling, and I might not fit in there. The world kind of is that way. Most promises in the fine print say, results not typical. In January, I took my car in and said, but this had lifetime warranty. And they said, we assume lifetime to mean 5.5 years. And guess how old mine was? 6. Those are the promises of the world in which we live. I preached a number of years ago at my home church's 100th anniversary. And I was looking through a book that had items from 100 years ago from that time. And one of the sections in this book had photographs. Someone had gone to a cemetery and taken snapshots of tombstones. And there's one that I have never forgotten. It said, in memory of Eileen Shannon, age 17, who was killed in an explosion of Danforth's non-exploding lamp oil. I'm sick to death of promises that are no good, of lifetime guarantees that wear out, of things that should last but don't, of things that could be true but aren't, of that subtlety of the world asking me to settle because I don't want to. But what more should I expect? After all, if I look at success in the world, the small print says, results not typical. We've been studying since Ash Wednesday, 40 Days of Love. And many of you, since you're good Presbyterians, can't stand any more love. So this is the last Sunday. We're done with love and we'll move on to something else. But in the midst of that love, we've looked at how to love even when we're angry, to love difficult people, to have a loving relationship that lasts. And today I want to do the last in the love series because I want to say that our world has a whole bunch of love filled with emptiness. But on the other hand, God takes the emptiness and fills it with love. And I want to look at 3 empty things today and have you think about the way that emptiness makes an opportunity for God to fill it up. The first is the love of the empty cross. I want you to think for a minute of pictures that you've seen of those 3 crosses on a hill. What it looked like on Good Friday, and now what it looks like on Easter. And center and think of the center cross. It's empty. In that emptiness, God finishes that love. You should too. Jesus is no longer on the cross. You shouldn't be either. One of the writers of the last century said, the problem with people is that we live our lives on a cross, crucified between two thieves. The thief of yesterday's regret and the thief of tomorrow's fear. Now, there's only one way to Easter, and that's through the cross. But we shouldn't stay there. Don't stay there. Don't get stuck there. Good Friday has to happen. But God's love says, it's happened and it's over. That's finished. The empty cross says, we're filled with God's love. Don't get stuck there. Don't stay there. We should not be living crucified lives. Jesus did that. So the empty promise of the empty cross is a life full of love. The second one is the empty tomb. That's the continuing way. In 1991, a woman named Ruth Dillow got the word that in the Gulf War, her son had stepped on a landmine. And the person from the army making the report to her said, I can't tell you anything else. We don't have information. It was February 1991. And she spent 3 days inconsolable, wondering if she would ever get the return of his body or part of it, if she would ever get confirmation, if she would ever get a fuller story as to what happened. She waited and she mourned and she cried and she agonized. And 3 days later, she picked up the phone when it rang and a crackly voice said, Mom, I'm alive. I'm alive. And her friend said, and she was inconsolable for 3 more days. Because the reality is, news from the graveyard of life is so welcome. It's what we want to hear. And that stone in front of the tomb is sin and hurt and brokenness and anger and frustration and fear. And when it gets moved away, the empty tomb means light and life. That the light of day can shine where there used to be the darkness of death. The empty tomb means our lives are filled with God's grace. It's true. You can believe it. Ruth Dillow believes it. And the third one is this. This is the one that may not seem the most obvious. It's the empty burial clothes. Why would we wear clothes of death? John says an interesting thing about this. That's what I love to do, test my Bible knowledge in the midst of 300 of my friends. I didn't write down the passage. I'm pretty sure it's John 20. I'm supposed to know this, right? Whew. That's in John 20. He spends this whole time talking about the burial clothes, but he gives a whole verse about it. It says this, Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but folded up in a place by itself. So it's kind of like a dinner napkin, and it's off to the side, all folded up like this. Now, there are lots of reasons why that could be so. And lots of people have made a lot of money as biblical scholars debating back and forth. But I just want to suggest one thing. I know it used to be in continental Europe in the 17 and 1800s, there was a very specific form of etiquette that rich people practiced to show that even if their servant wasn't there, they had a servant. This is how you would do it. When people sat to eat, they would sit at the table, and when they sat at the table, the servants just kind of hovered behind them, waiting to take care of their every need. If the person, when they got up from the table, took their napkin and just kind of threw it down, that meant to the servant they were done. The table should be cleared. I'm not coming back. But the code was, in the etiquette, if when you got up from the table, you took your napkin and you folded it and you set it at the table, it meant, don't touch anything. I'm coming back. And so the face cloth for Jesus is folded. Meaning, I don't need those clothes for dead people anymore. But I'm coming back. The empty burial clothes mean for us to throw off our shawls of despair and our overcoats of doom. The empty burial clothes mean life is full of possibility and hope. There's a story about a preacher, John Maxwell. He's a motivational speaker. He's all kinds of things. And he tells this story about getting a sport coat. He went to Nordstrom's, and he got this sport coat. And he said, as soon as he got it home, out of Nordstrom's light, he didn't like the color. And he wore it a couple times and didn't like it all the time. He was wearing it. And then he realized the thing attracted lint. And he hated that jacket. And when he did wear it over the next 6 months, he'd have to roll it forever and then even sometimes leave the gathering where he was and put Scotch tape on it. And he hated that jacket. And he said in the back of his mind all the time was Nordstrom's return policy, which said, we return anything at any time, under any circumstances. And he shoved it in his closet and didn't wear it for another year. And every time he pulled out a suit, he looked at that coat and thought, I hate that dumb thing. He said he left it in there for a while because somehow he was hoping it would attract all the lint off his other coats and at least it'd all be in one place. But finally one day he decided, I am going to test out their return policy. So he said, I felt kind of like a schmuck, but I kind of slithered in there and I had this coat, and he said, on the way over, even though I'm a pastor, I was thinking about all the tall tales I could tell about this coat. And then he said, as I parked in the parking lot, I thought, I know, the truth. So he walked into the men's department, and he came up to this dapper guy with a handlebar mustache, and he said, look, I'm here to test out your return policy. He said, I've had this coat for 18 months. I've worn it a bunch of times. I hate it. I hate the color. And look at the lint. This thing is full of lint. And then he said he stood there. And he waited. And the man said to him, for heaven's sake, what took you so long? Let's get you a new coat. And he took him in. He said 10 minutes later he had a coat that was marked $75 more than the one he had paid 18 months ago for. And he left that coat right there. He even threw a couple pieces of lint on it when he went by. I just wonder about those of us who are caught in worldly love that is filled with emptiness, and that God is waiting for us to return that and lay before Him our emptiness that God can fill with love. And if we get down off the cross and stop crucifying ourselves, and if we move out of the tomb into the world of light, and if we say, I'm ready to turn in these burial clothes of death, I'd like some new clothes. of life. What do you suppose God will say? For heaven's sake, what took you so long? Why should we wait any longer? Happy Easter.